Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Young, and welcome to another episode of Realcomm Live. We have got a great show for you today. It is a very hot topic, one that has been pretty much on fire for the last couple of years, been talked about for the last 5 to 7 years. And if you want to directly correlate it with the conversations we've been having on BIM, the conversation goes back well over 15 years ago. So what we are going to do today is we are going to try to unpack the conversation around digital twins. And there are a lot of misconceptions out there in the market. And what we're going to try to do is have a conversation that actually gets to the bottom of what is a digital twin, what can it be, who's using it, what are the applications, and hopefully after this episode you're going to have a little bit better understanding on how it relates to the commercial and corporate real estate industry. So before we bring on our two great guests, Dean Hopkins, COO of Oxford Properties, and Matt Vogel, the Principal Program Manager, Microsoft Azure IoT, Smart Places and Energy for Microsoft. We're going to show you a brief video, gives you a little overview, and then we're going to jump right into the conversation.
The Internet of Things gives businesses unprecedented insights into their assets. As connected solutions continue to evolve, companies are looking to create comprehensive digital models of their entire environments to gain insights that drive better products, optimization of operations, cost reduction, and breakthrough customer experiences. Examples include buildings, factories, farms, energy networks, railways, stadiums, even entire cities. Yet modeling and creating a digital representation of an environment can be difficult for even the most sophisticated enterprises. Azure Digital Twins makes this easy. It enables customers to model an environment and then bring this digital twin to life, scalable and secure. Businesses can connect assets such as IoT devices, as well as existing business systems to Azure Digital Twins. Azure Digital Twins helps break down silos that previously stood in the way of insights and provides a robust platform to build dynamic business logic on. Azure Digital Twins seamlessly integrates with Azure Data, Analytics, and AI services to make it easy to track the past and then predict the future, giving businesses the edge they need to meet the challenges they face today and tomorrow. Azure. Invent with purpose.
All right. Well, with that, I would like to bring on our guests, Dean and Matt, and let's get this conversation started. Guys, so good to see you. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Great.
So before we get started, just to set context, I mean, everybody knows who Microsoft is and most know who Oxford is, but just for context, this conversation that we're having today is with, if not the global leader, one of the global leaders in ERP and technology for 30 to 40 years, I'm guessing, Matt. And yeah. Oxford, one of the leading real estate organizations, certainly in North America, and from an innovation standpoint, I could go so far as to saying globally. Okay, so I want the audience to understand we are talking to two people who've got a lot of expertise, and second of all, have the capability to scale this conversation to a level not many organizations can. And as I mentioned in the opening, we've been talking about this on and off for 15 years in some fashion. And one of the things I want to get to today is to understand what a digital twin is, because there are a lot of misconceptions out there. Everybody associates it with 3D visualization, much like BIM, was pushing. So why don't we start with you, Dean, and give us a little overview, high level, on what you think a digital twin is as it relates specifically to the real estate market.
Sure, thanks, Jim. Listen, I've been relatively new to the real estate industry after spending sort of 25 plus years in technology. And one of the reasons I got so excited about twins when Matt and I and the gang at Microsoft and a number of real estate leaders met a little over a year and a half ago, 15 months ago or so, was that I believe that real estate was going through a similar transition to many other parts of the built world, where what we needed was sort of an integrated way to act upon the physical assets that was moved into more of the digital realm. And so what I saw the opportunity for digital twins to be is not what we think about as kind of BIM on steroids, but much more of a kind of digital representation of that physical and item, much the way a Azure or AWS is the virtual representation of a data center. No one thinks about going and racking and stacking and cabling physical goods in a data center anymore. They think about logging onto the website and manipulating their environment in AWS or Azure. And all those are digital replicas of that physical environment. And we need the same for buildings to basically, as I became more familiar with what was going on in buildings, there's just so many different disparate systems that don't talk to one another, that are different vintages. And it's very difficult to get an integrated view of everything that's going on in the building, let alone being able to apply any kind of logic to that or algorithms to that to be able to optimize it, because they're just, everything is all over the place and there's no way to bring it all together. And so my view was that twins were a great way to build that replica, model it so that it isn't just data sitting in a database somewhere. It's actually a model, a representation of the building and how the building works that's connected to the live data about the building, so that we have a actual replica in real time of what's going on in that building and how it operates. The visualizations help then allow you to kind of see into what that is, but the core of a twin is what's under the skin. It's all of that digital the replica itself that then gives us some real opportunities.
And this question may be better for the second half of our conversation, but if not, take a stab at it. I mean, when you have a component, a piece of equipment in a building, and that piece of equipment has multiple pieces of equipment that make it up, do you go inside that piece of equipment to that level, or is it simply the piece of equipment that's attached to the building?
I mean, I think it depends. I think it depends on what you need to do and when you need to do it. So I think we've started down the road, and we'll talk about this later on, the notion of a minimum viable twin, which is a concept I coined, to the notion of, listen, you don't have to have an all singing, all dancing, 6D BIM version of a twin to get value out of it. There's actually ways to begin in a very light fashion where you can kind of get a ton of value out of having a model of the building that represents what signals you can already discover about that building. And which
a basic approach.
Yeah, basic twin. And what I think people attribute to twins is a lot of the greenfield stuff, raising a new building out of the ground and building a very elaborate twin. I'm coming at it the other way, right? Completely the other way, which is 99% of our assets are already in the ground. And I think I want to really create an opportunity to enhance the customer experience, to enhance the ability for our asset managers, to enhance the ability for our property operations teams. I think a twin really gives them a leg up in being able to do that. So I'm actually taking twins to the brownfield, not to the greenfield.
Well, 2 points. Number one, we can't boil the ocean. Any project I've ever seen try to boil the ocean usually fails. And second of all, from a sustainability standpoint, the new built environment, yes, there's emerging countries around the world, they're going to have a lot of new construction. You can nip that in the butt. But the majority of the energy consumption, the wasteful energy consumption that's going on right now is the existing built environment, to your point. And I think that's where the focus is going to have the biggest impact. So, Matt, you know, Microsoft, global leader. I've been on this journey with Microsoft going on maybe 8-9 years now, starting with Daryl Smith way back with 77 acres. What was the acres?
88 acres. Yeah.
88 acres. Thank you. And talking about the role that Microsoft could play in this industry, bringing consistency and scale and all this technical expertise. In your role and working with people like Dean and others, tell us what Microsoft thinks about this digital twin as it relates to the real estate industry.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so you mentioned it, as Microsoft, we are significant owners and occupants ourselves, but we're also a technology provider. We're a platform enabler. So especially in the real estate space where we rely on an ecosystem of partners and customers to come together, we do not actually have a finished real estate solution ourselves. We actually partner with the broader industry because we don't want it to be something proprietary to just Microsoft. So when we looked at digital twins, we came to that same conclusion that Dean had, that it has to go beyond just BIM on steroids. It's how do you bring in data from live sources, whether that's the BMS or other bespoke sensors that you're installing, or even other data that's out there like weather data. How do you represent your space? How do you model the information? How do you bring together the relationship between people, places, devices? all the way to understanding the physics and mechanics of how the building works in context of that twin, the visualization, as Dean mentioned. But most importantly, it also is the integration layer. We saw in the industry, especially kind of talking to Dean and a lot of his peers, is that the days of the walled garden have to be over. All of these landlords, all of these owners, as well as the occupants, they're tired of all these solutions being sold in silos that can't talk to each other. So for example, if you wanted to turn off your HVAC because no one's in a specific room, there's no way for those solutions to talk to each other. And that's where we believe digital twins plays a part. And so what we've invested very deeply in is Azure Digital Twins as a platform enabler for representing the relationships between the people, places, and devices, but also opening up the modeling language beneath that. So that way, everyone can coalesce along the same lines of shared ontologies that are widespread throughout the industry. And so you've probably seen our partnership with Real Estate Core. And especially, Jim, as you mentioned, starting to enable the connected ecosystems, it's imperative that solutions adopt those shared ontologies, because otherwise there's no way for you to understand that you're talking about that same physical construct if you're using different digital mechanisms.
Exactly. Well,
yeah, listen, Jim, this was one of the most exciting things for me when Matthew and his colleagues and our gang started talking was, listen, buildings don't exist by themselves, right? They actually live in a campus, in a city, amongst, our occupiers who live inside them. And the future is already here where those each have their own twin. And so we're already talking, and we've seen it happen in the industry where an occupier's twin and a building's twin have to talk to one another. And in order to do that, one can't be talking French and one talking Portuguese. Like, they've got to actually be all sharing the same view of what the world looks like. So we needed a company like Microsoft to come along and bring some of their global scale to say, right, we can do this. We can build a set of standards that allow that to occur. And that's been a major, major leap forward for all of us, to have that standard be an open source standard. So it's not just Microsoft, it's actually open collaboration. Google, AWS, Azure, everybody else can kind of wrap around this thing, and we can all peacefully coexist and have our twins work together.
Right. Yeah, that was definitely an important consideration when we entered the market too. Is we approached it with humility. We are, initially we were not real estate experts ourselves. We're cloud, AI, IoT, data experts, as well as experts in empowering ecosystems of developers. And so when we approached it, we didn't want to be the standard bearers for data modeling for the industry. That's why we looked out and found Real Estate Core as those leaders in representing open source data models that were used in practice today. And then where we focused was developing out that partner ecosystem of, now we have hundreds of ISVs and OEMs building on our stack, specifically in the real estate industry. And we're making sure that our platform capabilities from Azure, as well as Dynamics and M365, empower the right solutions and the right design patterns to bring those all together to solve the needs of the landlords and the owners, as well as the occupants and the facility managers.
Well, and if you think about the transformation of the internet, where we went from a simple communications through HTML, rich media, all the way to IoT, if you follow that general trend, IoT as it relates to buildings, very specific, very obvious. It seems like it was a natural evolution for Microsoft to say, okay, next thing is, if you look up at this, if you look at your world, you may have, as a human, 3 or 4 IP addresses, right? Multiple devices. You look up in that ceiling, there's hundreds, if not thousands of IP addresses, right? With all this equipment, whether it's a building or an airplane engine. And so I just think this Internet of Things, and I call it the industrial Internet of Things in our world, was a logical step. And it's great to see a company like Microsoft embrace it, because without that scale, without that horsepower, this thing just trickles on. Now I think it's got a real chance of sticking.
Yeah, and it's also broadened the way we think about the industry too, where IoT for a long time, like you mentioned, is industrial and manufacturing. It's all about connected assets. Now, because of real estate and smart places, we're thinking about connected environments. So what is that device in context of a space? But also connected ecosystem. A building doesn't just stand alone. It's part of a city. It's part of the connected infrastructure with the grid. There are many more connections you can make once you have that established digital twin, and that's where Dean is really helping push us, not just in concept and greenfield, but also in existing assets and deploying that across the portfolio.
And what's so fun about it, how long it takes great ideas to evolve. Ken Sakamura, 1985, Tron, the real operating network out of Tokyo. That was his vision. What you just said was that guy's vision. So how many years ago was that? 25, 40 years ago.
I'll tell you two things that sort of really made the switch for me, which was, I think a lot of people, I mean, we've already talked about it being applied to development, but if we then start to pivot into people struggling to get twins to gain traction in real estate, they'd focus too much on property operations as being the kind of locus of why you do it, to sort of either, save money or reduce friction in that. And I realized very quickly that actually this is about a customer outcome and a value outcome. So when I say to our asset managers, in 5 years from now, a building without a digital twin will be worth less, because the occupiers won't want to go into a building where their twin can't talk to the twin of the building. It becomes a real pressing asset management conversation. It's like, I don't have the right lobby, I don't have the right roof, I don't have the right HVAC system to guarantee healthy outcomes. If I don't have a digital twin, I'm going to be a B-class building. That's just a fact. So, we started to get attention paid to people who actually control the checks, because we're saying, hey, listen, the assets are actually worth more. And why are they worth more? Because the customers are asking for it, right? We're starting to see the front, Microsoft asking for it. They're not going to look at a building anymore if it doesn't have a twin, because their whole end-to-end experience for their workforce is all based on a twin. And so if they can't sit and get their twin to talk to the twin of the building, it's not even going to make it to the top of the list. And the same is happening for EY, the same is happening for Accenture, like all these sophisticated occupiers. This is the direction of travel. So in order to be competitive with the customer, you're going to need to offer this. And that is going to press us into action, where something that might have been more of a nice to have, a kind of a something interesting for the property teams, it's now really relevant for sales, really relevant for asset managers to make sure that they're protecting and enhancing the value of their assets.
So there's this guy, Jeffrey Moore, that came up with this thing called the innovation curve, that talks about innovators, early adopters, early majority laggards. I forgot the exact terms, but when we come back from our commercial break, I want to talk about, what is it going to take to get this from the innovator stage, into the early adopters. And I think you guys all fall in that range to get the rest of the market to understand this. So let's take a brief pause and hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
You are taking care in multiple ways to protect your community and yourself from COVID-19. And because we're all in this together, thank you. You expect to be able to continue to do this when you return to your workplace. The office elevators have stickers to limit crowding. You understand that distancing reduces overall capacity of your building's elevators, but you are not alone if you're wondering, how will I avoid overcrowding in the elevator lobbies? Or will I have to wait in a really long line? What if your office building was working with you on this? UpNext by Join on your smartphone is your partner to help you and everyone in your office maintain safe distancing when waiting for elevator rides, both up and down. You can make a reservation, and UpNext will tell you when it's time to head toward the lobby and when it's your turn to ride. You can also ride standby, and UpNext provides brightly colored passes so you can easily coordinate with your coworkers on whose turn it is. UpNext includes helpful countdowns for when you need to wait a moment. So go ahead and install UpNext and elevate trust. Learn more about innovations from Join at joindigital.com.
All right, let's bring back our guests and continue this very interesting conversation. So guys, I want to put some time context into this. We've been talking about these ideas conceptually for many years. Seems like the stars are aligning. You've got folks like Oxford wanting it, sophisticated building owner operators, companies like Microsoft bringing that scale and that horsepower to the conversation. But you, especially Dean, being in the real estate industry, well, actually you said you're relatively new. For those of us who've been around the industry, it's a pretty stubborn industry. And it takes time for things and people to change. So I put you at the top of the pyramid as far as leading the charge. What will it take to get the rest of the industry to, number one, understand it, and two, move to actually begin implementing it? Let's start with Dean.
Yeah, so listen, I think previous efforts to launch twins were quite cumbersome, expensive, time-consuming, because they really focused on the greenfield side, and they were hundreds of thousands of dollars and extremely expensive. And even focused on the brownfield, it would take quite a long time per building, and again, quite a lot of coordination and kind of technical prowess to do. It just wasn't Apple-like in terms of its ability to sort of be deployed. And so, we've had to work really hard with Matthew and Microsoft and a number of partners and even ourselves to do a proof of concepts to say, hey, listen, how could we stand up a minimum viable twin in the absolute minimum amount of time with the absolute minimum amount of expense so that you can begin iterating? Because the whole thing is going to start from having a basic amount of capability and then moving forward. And the good news is our proof of concept shows that we've got there. So we took a really complicated multi-100,000 square foot building, and in one day, 8 hours, we're able to discover and render a twin in Microsoft's platform with our friends Willow to basically not just capture all the data, but build a model of the building in true digital twin fashion and be able to then produce an outcome that allowed our people to see what was going on one day.
Now you had a communications infrastructure where all those disparate systems were connected, right?
So so to be fair, there was some prep work done. We knew that site had a converged network, so we could actually see everything. Okay. So, but the good news is, even in sites where there isn't a converged network where we can see everything, we're starting to realize what that now looks like in a much lighter touch way to be able to gain access to what we want to gain access to. So the work we're doing right now is to actually prepare all our buildings from a cyber perspective to sort of get them adequately protected, because I think everybody in the whole industry needs to be upping their game on a cyber perspective. Once all that cyber work is done, the good news is it actually plays double duty. When you do the cyber work, you then create the conditions for you to render a twin very, very lightweight. So we've merged the two so that we have a digital strategy that starts with cyber and starts with base infrastructure and ends with minimum viable twins. And we've got the economics and the experience to be, I'd say, Matt, you can comment, but I'd say quite a lot less friction than might have been the experience in the past.
But it's safe to assume that it makes an awful lot of sense to have a converged network.
Oh yeah, I mean you can't adequately secure your building, and I can guarantee every single one of your buildings that is not on a converged network is already compromised. That's the bad thing about cyber is you go in not assuming you aren't compromised, assuming you are, and that you've got an uphill battle, and we've in fact found that everywhere. So
in our Realcomm community, the word converged network is fairly common, but in the general real estate market as a whole, it is not. And we continue to be out there beating the drums, trying to have those discussions.
Must be done. Yeah.
We only have a couple minutes, so I'm going to actually try to get a question in. Matthew, we got a question. How would you define digital twin in a simple elevator ride pitch?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the simplest version is really a digital representation of the physical world. You could dig into that, and I think we talked about previously about all the different aspects of a holistic twin, one that can bring in the data and the structure and the physics and the time or history, the visualization, the extensibility. But ultimately, at its simplest, it's a digital representation of the physical world. And to your point earlier, it's really our job collectively to help accelerate that development for industry and portfolio scale. We don't want it to take months to onboard a digital twin to a building, and that's where we are investing very heavily to, as Dean mentioned, bring it down to days, if not hours.
Another good question was what resources are available to train on digital twins. I'd offer up the Realcomm library. We've got webinars up on our YouTube channel as a starting point for a general awareness on the topic. Guys, any suggestions on where folks can go for more detailed training on digital twins?
Well, selfishly, I'd point people to the Azure Digital Twins product page. So for developers, I'd recommend get very deep in the APIs and the technical resources there. We have lots of white papers about how to develop solutions around that. But we know that not everyone is technical, and so we also partner that with solution-focused pages as well. So we have Azure App Source and Azure Marketplace, where you could find partners like Dean mentioned, Willow, and a number of others who are Azure certified. So you know that they're running on Azure Digital Twins. You know that they're ready for deployment, and that's where you find those right solutions to deploy into your buildings.
Okay, guys, I so apologize. I mean, go ahead, Dean. We're out of time.
I was just going to say, there's the Microsoft and a number of players have created a digital twin consortium that is actually exploring the kind of concept of digital twin, getting people to be more aware of what it is. I'm sure there's resources through the digital twin consortium that are for those interested. A, get involved in that. B, there's lots more there. It's cross industry. It's not just real estate, but it actually It's, I think, a quite helpful concept because digital twins are here to stay, and it's just a matter of now advancing the science and the technology behind them.
So I know what we've just done, I think a couple recent webinars, which is a deeper format. We go deeper into the topic than we do on Realcomm Live. But I'm going to suggest to our team that maybe we get another webinar planned, 90 minutes deep. We got lots of questions that went unanswered today. I think we're going to take these questions, capture them, and then maybe shape up another webinar, invite you two back as well as a couple other panelists. I think we got to keep going deeper on this topic. So in the meantime, check our website, our YouTube channel. And Matt offered up a good site as well. And guys, I apologize, we are out of time, but this is not going to be the last conversation, I promise you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Be well. Take care. All right, as you can see, big topic, a lot of moving pieces, catching on finally. And as they both said, this is now here to stay, and we're going to stay on top of this topic. With that, I'd like to bring in my good friend and partner, Howard Berger, who is going to bring us up to speed on the news. Howard, I think you got some interesting topics this week, and excited to hear it.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Hey, and thank you, Matthew and Dean. Great show today. So I'll give you, here's a little news. So every week we highlight a few of the stories from our weekly news briefings that's released every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific. So subscription's free. Just go up to our website, realcomm.com, and click on news to see all the stories. So our lead story this week actually focuses on a conversation between Jim Young and a longtime colleague, a technology pioneer and friend, Scott Morey, who's executive director of 111 Advisors, which is a technology consulting organization, now a division of Altus Group. And this chronicles a continuation of an old conversation between Jim Scott and Wayne Pryor that took place on the Realcomm session stage nearly 2 years ago, called Uncovering the PropTech Trends for 2019. Easier said than done, where the threesome took really an unvarnished look at PropTech hype versus reality. So in the article, they kick off with a historical perspective of PropTech, along with a look at the cyclical nature of its growth and retrenchment. Then continue with recent advancements in data application, enterprise architecture, and how they're enabling a more flexible dynamic between different property types and operating models. So Jim and Scott then go on to explore business priorities, how they've shifted with the pandemic, and how that's impacted technology adoption, and then close with how the role of the technology leader has changed and what the necessary attributes are for a successful CIO today. Again, great insights by two gentlemen who collectively have more than half a century of experience and wisdom dealing with commercial real estate technology design, implementation, and adoption. Next, so we've all been keeping a close eye on when organizations are going to start having employees come back to the office. Some are saying they'll start with a hybrid model in June, some say September, others aren't committing to any substantial return until 2022. Salesforce recently made news announcing that they're going to allow folks to continue working remotely indefinitely. So it's significant news that Microsoft announced this week that they're planning to reopen the Redmond and Seattle, Washington-based headquarters later this month after a year of working from home. They're taking a gradual approach, working with local authority restrictions, and they're going to closely watch progress of the virus and stay flexible and responsive as needed. Did a survey, they found that 73% of their workers really do want to continue with flexible remote work, and Microsoft considers working from home part-time as standard for employees, and employees will have the choice to return to facilities, continue to work remotely, or do a mixture of both. Being Microsoft, they are, of course, continuing to look for ways to use their technology to bridge the gap between office and remote. Also, great news, Argus Enterprise Platform users will be happy to hear that now with the launch of Argus Connector, they can now seamlessly share data with Yardi Voyager. And this out-of-the-box API integration is really going to help automate that flow of lease and property data from Voyager to the cloud-based Argus Enterprise, and eventually lead to a seamless bi-directional flow of valuation data between the two platforms. This is one of many integrations that Altus has on the agenda for other providers. And this is a time where property ERP users are really demanding higher levels of transparency across their portfolios, looking for more efficient and accurate ways to manage the data. So with that, I'm out of time. That's it for me today.
I'll tell you, Howard, great stories, both on the return from work and the technology. Again, Microsoft in the forefront. Great news from our industry leaders getting their technologies to work together. So we continue this long journey of applying technology to the buildings and how we interact with them, and the stories reflect that. So thanks again for a great week of digging up the good news, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Okay, so with that, before I wrap the show, we're going to hear from our final speaker, or sponsor, I should say, and then I'll come back and let you know what we're going to be doing next week.
Offices, stores, and restaurants require cost-effective solutions for workplace safety monitoring. Rigado provides easy-to-deploy sensor networks designed specifically for these commercial spaces. Our wireless sensors are plug-and-play for quick installation, and our edge computing gateways are pre-configured to deliver data directly to your enterprise applications, making it easy to start tracking workplace safety, occupancy, cleaning activity, and more. If your team is looking for the fastest path to pilot, our integrated kits for Azure IoT offer out-of-the-box monitoring with a wide range of sensor options. Find out more at rigado.com.
All right. Well, next week, we're going to continue our conversation on smart buildings. We have looked all over the world. Once a month, we try to get different perspectives on where different regions are where they are with the smart building conversation. And next week, we're coming right back here to North America, the United States and Canada. And we've got two great guests, Daniel Lambrinos from Quadrille and Joe Amador from Amador Consulting. So you won't want to miss that very specific, great conversation on smart building activity in North America. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and have a great weekend. And we will see you next Friday. Be well.